July baby. Shall I
Okay.
start again? Back in 1931, and I know you all are figuring, he is 90 years old. He was raised in Concord, North Carolina, graduated from Concord High School, attended the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Commerce in 1953. He immediately entered the Air Force as a second lieutenant and began pilot training. 21 years later, he had accumulated over 3,000 hours of jet time with a command pilot rating. And he had flown all the jet fighters of the day. How many were there? Do you know?
F-86, T-33, F-104, F-100, F-105.
So five. In 1955,
Don't ask me questions.
Quincy was selected with 70 other Air Force second lieutenants to train the first 3 classes in military studies at the new Air Force Academy. And this group was known as ATOs, Air Training Officers, not Alpha Tau Omega.
But we drank about the same amount.
He later earned his jump wings at Fort Benning, Georgia, while being a flight commander in an F-104 unit at George Air Force Base, California. And he now resides with me at the Cypress, which is a retirement community.
I'll give you a test later on. Please join me in prayer. Dear God, creator of us all, you tell us to be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Lord, you have blessed my life and kept me safe for 90 years. As I write about what you have done with my life, may it be a guide for others. I ask this in your holy name. Amen. Amen. Well, time marches on. I look at that book and I say, I can't believe that it took me about 3.5 years to write this thing. And I was amazed at how easy the information came. Once I got going, it is not fiction. It's real. It's me. It's my life, such as it is. And God has really used me in ways that are unbelievable. And I thank him for that. It is my intent to read a couple of chapters. They're very short chapters. And I think that you will enjoy each of these Some are funny, some are not funny. Some are descriptive of treatment, and that sure as heck ain't funny. So the first thing I'm going to do is to read a chapter called The First Safari. The First Safari. Chapter 6. Hitler began World War II on his 50th birthday in April 1939. Over 60,000 German troops paraded in his honor, and the parade lasted over 5 hours. Meanwhile, in a sleepy little city named Concord, 2 grammar school playmates left their homes on Hillcrest Drive and headed for their favorite place, the 3 Mile Branch. It was just a small creek with sand and weeds, and it wound around an area that flooded when a lot of rain fell. But today, it was like today. It was calm and peaceful and warm. Best of all, it was warm. My best friend was a guy named Lee Kynard. Lee and his family lived in a duplex apartment next door to me. Years later, Lee made a name for himself in the Greensboro area as a TV anchorman, and his name became synonymous with broadcast excellence, compassion, and good old Southern charm. Yes, Lee was my buddy, and we were up to no good on this beautiful April day. Lee's mother had warned us many times about taking off our clothes down by the creek and romping up and down all natural. But it was exhilarating fun, and we knew we weren't supposed to do it. That was the real challenge. At any rate, off they came. We threw the clothes up on the bank of the creek, up and down, across and jumped, and 2 young gazelles leaped with joy and freedom, as if we had just been released from our cage. We chased each other, played follow the leader, and went way beyond our normal play space, just so we could say we had explored. I didn't know then what a motivational concept that would become in both of our lives. But right then, we were just having a lot of fun. We must have played for several hours without the slightest feeling of fatigue. But a quick look at the position of the sun told us that it was late and we'd better get our fannies home. It was always a task to try to determine where we were after running blindly up and down that long stretch of creek, and then realizing that we were naked as jaybirds and no place to hide. We searched frantically until we finally recognized the small hill where we had thrown our clothes. Yep, this was it. But our clothes weren't there. Someone had taken them. We started to panic. Way up on the hill where the access road ended, we heard a car horn beep. There stood Lee's mother with our clothes in her hand. She yelled for us to make it home on our own. Her instructions ended with, "And be careful." Be careful. How in God's name were we going to walk through woods and neighborhoods and be careful? We looked at each other. Now we really were naked, embarrassed, angry, frustrated, and naked. It doesn't get much worse than that for two little boys out in the wilderness of life alone. So what were we to do? We looked for cover, leaves, branches, anything that would hide us. We also checked the woods and the road and the paths so we could plan a course that would be hard for us to be seen. Off we went, each step like walking on eggshells. Our heads were on swivels, checking for people who might see us. We were like deer running in the night, except it was broad daylight. A quick move here, a stop, then full speed ahead until we heard a noise or thought we saw something. This was a frightening experience, one I would never forget, but we weren't home yet. Each of us thought about the last dash we would have to take to put us inside our homes. We each had different environments to conquer as we split up in the red hills behind our homes. We didn't even say goodbye. We just ran as fast as our legs would carry us, and we did it without police discovering us or our neighbors screaming. Thank God our doors were always unlocked. We entered like Roman soldiers returning from a conquest. Did we learn a lesson from this? Most certainly. Never head to the 3 Mile Branch when Lee's mother was home. Kind of an interesting little deal. Now, I'm going to a chapter that just sometimes does me in. It's called The Date That Haunts Me. Chapter 12. This woman was beautiful. Her spirit was enticing, her manners impeccable, and her eyes were sparkling. One gorgeous woman. I met her at a high school band clinic in Salisbury, North Carolina. She played alto sax. I played baritone sax. So we were in the same section and certainly had a lot of eye contact with each other, especially when actually playing. Now, I don't know how many of you played instruments in high school, but have you ever tried to smile at someone while biting down on a mouthpiece and reading music? I learned to master this task at that band clinic in Salisbury. Jane and I became good friends and hung out together at every break in rehearsal and at several special events scheduled during our 3-day clinic. I had built up a huge desire to bring Jane into my life, even though she lived in Canopolis and I in Concord. Even Duke and Chapel Hill couldn't compete with the rivalry between the Concord Spiders and the Little Wonders of A.L. Brown High School. But here I was trying to bridge that gap romantically. Well, the conclusion came at the final concert of the clinic when mothers, fathers, family, friends, and others drove in for the final concert, including Jane's high school boyfriend that I didn't know existed. During the concert, my eye contact with Jane kept building until the crescendo of the final theme almost made me cross-eyed. Then the volume faded as the audience rose in acclamation. But my little tune with Jane was over as we departed on our separate paths. All of this occurred in 1948. Fast forward to Christmas leave from the rigors of military training at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. Our hero, namely me, had just completed the first semester of the fourth class system. We called it Hell Week. But after a whole semester, I was ready to have something glamorous happen in my life. Jane came into my mind, even though I had not been in contact with her since the band clinic in Salisbury. But I had the hope that yesterday's boyfriend was now in the missing persons file. Perhaps now there was an opportunity for me to enter her arena with a herald of trumpets. When I reached home, I started searching for any clue that might lead me to Lady Jane. It was tough, because I could not for the life of me recall her last name. After much research, guessing, jumping to conclusions, I ended up with a telephone number in Kannapolis. That was all I needed. Concord College students always had a Christmas dance at the Concord Hotel. So this was to be my piece of cheese to get this darling little mouse to say yes and into my arms again. With my heart in my throat, I dialed the number. I had hoped for a lot of rings so I could settle down a bit, but someone picked up on the very first ring. Is Jane there? I mumbled. Just a minute, the voice replied. Now I'm hooked. I thought, damn, the next voice I hear will be hers. I became more nervous and uncertain. My confidence was fading on me, and a leering voice said, hello? Wow, it was her, and I was at bat. I told her who I was. She acknowledged remembering me as Mr. Music and the strutting drum major of Concord High School. I had already reasoned that I didn't want to bring up the music clinic because of the boyfriend. So I got right to the point and asked her for a date for the dance. She didn't hesitate. Yes, of course, she says, I'm looking forward to seeing you again. As I hung up the phone, weak and a wee bit trembling, Mom rounded the corner and asked what my problem was. I told her that I had just made a date with an angel. The day of the dance arrived. I had worked on my car until I had rubbed the chrome off the front bumper. I had also ordered a corsage from Mrs. Mills at the floral shop and had put it in the fridge to keep it fresh. And there was no MapQuest back then. So I meticulously planned the drive to her home like General Eisenhower planned the D-Day invasion at Normandy, the time arrived for me to leave. Mom and Dad said, "Be careful." Off I went like a herd of turtles. I arrived right on time, rang the doorbell, and stood back thinking how wise and resourceful I had been in making all of these arrangements. The door opened, and an attractive mother-like lady said, "You must be Quincy." I owned up to that and gave her the corsage to pass along to Jane. After she left the room, I edged over to the beautiful piano in the living room. I play by ear, so I sat down and started playing one of my favorite romantic songs. Bum, 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 tenderly. I mean, I really got into playing this song. I could have been playing opening night at Carnegie Hall. I was at the high point in the music when I heard the door open. I wheeled about like Liberace at a concert and came to my feet as if I'd been given an order to stand at attention. There in front of me was a girl I'd never seen. And her name was Jane. I must have looked like they just took my lottery winning away from me, but I was dumbfounded, but quickly decided that right then was not the time or the place for truth and honor to prevail. So I decided to play the role I had created. I got away with it until about an hour into the dance when Jane announced, "I'm not who you thought I was. Is that correct?" I said, "Yes, dear, it is correct." I admitted she was right, but I added, I'm having fun, and I hope you are too." She asked me to take her home. And so we left the dance. The drive to her home was like a funeral procession, and I was the director. Silence prevailed. A nice lady was heard that evening, and it has haunted me ever since. This Jane later married a friend of mine in Concord. Small world, isn't it? Well, it's time to get into a little more of the experiences that I had. So let me do that. This is chapter 32, and I named it The Citadel Ring and the Beginning of the End, but I'm going to cut out the Citadel Ring part, which is that. And are there any Citadel grads in here? Nobody wanted an education. Okay. So I'm starting on page 173, the beginning of the end. On September the 2nd, 1965, I trotted out to my F-105 at Top Lee, Thailand for my third mission of the day. I had just been appointed the wing weapons officer. My job was to plan and develop the very best training program possible for our combat crews, not only in nuclear and conventional weapons delivery, but also air-to-air combat and air-to-ground strafing operations. I had left my family at Yokota Air Base right outside of Tokyo, and that did not involve Catherine. She is a product of me coming to this church and meeting her, and then we got married. Not a bad deal. I had come down to Yokota Air Base on TDY to get as much experience as I could in the mission we had in Southeast Asia, primarily dropping bombs and rockets on selected targets and providing air coverage against enemy aircraft trying to sneak in and hit our bombing aircraft. This was my 13th mission, and we were a flight of 4. No reported flak that day on this bridge target, and that was music to my ears. So as the song says, off we go, and you know that. Heading to a remote spot between Laos and North Vietnam. It was a beautiful day, just like today, with no cloud formations. As I hit my afterburner on the runway to get rolling, I was aware of my ring because my glove fit so tightly that it was like a surgical glove, but comfortable. And this fighting machine, namely me, was ready to go. The weather was CAFB. Now, I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I do now. Clear as a frapping bell. That was great because it was the time of year for big billowing clouds that would go up to 40 or 50,000 feet and knock you around in the cockpit like a tennis ball in a professional tennis match. The description from the intelligence officer as to what kind of opposition or resistance we might encounter on this mission was, again, no reported flak. Man, that was the best news my ears could have heard, because in the last targets we had hit that day, we had experienced a lot of flak. That was threatening to us as pilots and to our aircraft. To tell the truth, it was scary as hell. As a kid growing up in Concord, I remember seeing newsreels in the local theaters that showed our bombers flying over Germany during World War II, delivering weapons on the German manufacturing complex. I always felt that these little white puffy balls that were popping up around the aircraft were kind of pretty, but little did I realize how dangerous these little puff balls really were. Because as the white smoke appears in the explosion, thousands of pieces of shrapnel are being projected at a very high rate out from the center. That is what brought down the airplanes in World War II, and also the airplanes that were flying to bomb North Vietnam. If we were diving into an area to deliver weapons and saw the white fluffy balls, you can be certain that we would be shaking in our boots, because the next thing would be tremendous vibrations of the aircraft as we came near the explosion. You just held your breath that the shrapnel would miss you. This little destruction or distraction, along with following your instruments, plus arming your weapons and watching your delivery systems, kept you as busy as hell in the cockpit. There was not time to be thinking of other things. The final part of our flight briefing was a description of the armament we were carrying and a brief of exactly how we were to deliver these weapons. Today, the target was a bridge over a small river at a point where Laos and North Vietnam came together. I had already flown missions that day using the same delivery techniques, so I was not concerned at all about that part of the mission. Plus, there was no reported flak and the weather was clear. What more could a fighter pilot ask for other than a good-looking woman co-pilot? Our 4 F-105s lined up in formation on the runway. A nod of the lead's head indicated that we should push the throttle up while holding the brakes and check our engine operating gauges. We had been briefed on a single ship takeoff because we were carrying a lot of 750-pound bombs under each wing, rockets, and a full load of fuel. So safety was our #1 concern. Finally, lead released his brakes, went into afterburner, and accelerated down the runway. The afterburner coming on was a real kick in the pants as it pushed you back into your seat, and the aircraft immediately accelerated. 8 seconds later, each of us in turn would do the exact same thing until we were all airborne and climbing to our established altitude. We kept in a very loose formation until lead motioned for us to get in closer so that we could check each other's aircraft and weapons. After that was completed, we slipped out again. All was well, and now we could think about our ETA, our estimated time of arrival at the target. I had set up my Doppler navigation system after I started my engine. The F-105 is a single engine aircraft for a single pilot. So my home base was now set, plus our first checkpoint where we crossed the Mekong River, and then the next one was the target. The Doppler system was very accurate. We needed it because the jungles below hid any way of telling where you were. An arrow in the cockpit pointed directly to the target, and another window showed the mileage to go. My airplane was a Cadillac in the sky. But about 50 miles out from the target, I saw something that tied my stomach in a knot and caused my heart to really begin pounding. I spotted newly uncovered ground close to the target, and that really concerned me. Why was this grading necessary? If there were no anti-aircraft weapons in that area, remember, no reported flak, then why do they need earth-moving machines there? My first thought was that the enemy was preparing to defend this site, and I was their target. My answer came very shortly. It was time to get into position to start a bombing run. So I clicked the mic and the throttle to let my flight of 4 know that I was rolling in. We would not use voice in the mic because using that electronic device would give away our exact position in the airspace over the target. So I banked my trusty steed, put the nose down to accelerate, and rolled into a dive to begin my run. Just as I did this, my world came apart. Wham! Bang! I was hit. Immediately, every instrument in the cockpit showed that everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Fire and smoke filled the cockpit. I was in trouble, deep trouble. I felt another explosion. I wasn't sure if I'd been hit again by anti-aircraft fire or my own bombs were going off. I went through my emergency procedures without even having to think about them because I had rehearsed them so many times. I couldn't see outside or see any of my instruments at this time. Was I upside down, nose up, on my back? I didn't know. I gave myself an order that was tough to take. Get the hell out of here. Boom! The aircraft shook like I'd been hit again. I was sitting in an ejection seat, so I reached for the handles that were on either armrest. Pulling these handles would blow the canopy off and expose triggers on each armrest. Then, when fired, would launch me in a rocket seat to safety in the airspace above the aircraft. I recall quite clearly that all my actions seemed to be reduced to SLOWMOTION. But I never remembered whether I left the airplane by ejecting or because the plane exploded. I do know one thing. I had to have been doing over 700 knots when I ejected and hit the airstream because my body later looked like I had been dumped into a cement mixer and dropped from Mount Everest. When I finally opened my eyes after regaining consciousness, I was sitting, leaning against a tree with nothing on but my shorts. Across from me were 4 ancient mariners, old militiamen, protecting their part of Vietnam. There was no parachute, no ejection seat, no flight suit, no boots, no pistol or survival mat. God, I was just about naked in the jungles of Laos or North Vietnam, and I was alone. No rescue aircraft circling, no choppers hovering close by. So I took stock of myself. I had 2 arms, but I could only see 1 leg. Damn. My left leg was bent grotesquely out to the left. I could clearly see that it was broken in several places above the knee. It made me sick to see that I did not have the means to escape. I wasn't going anywhere. I guess every nerve ending in my body was on alert because I hurt. God, did I hurt. I only had my mind to throw up against it. I looked down again at my right arm and hand, and my ring was gone. One of those old bastards had my citadel ring and my watch, and they were gone forever. I pointed to my leg, and my captors came over to see me more closely. They conversed excitedly and then began to move my left leg back to its normal position. I became unglued at this point because the pain was more than I could bear. In fact, it was so intense I could not concentrate on what they were doing. Eventually, they wrapped vine around my entire left leg, put me in a net with poles on their shoulders, and carried me to a Russian Jeep type vehicle and literally threw me into the rear compartment. I was holding on to my left leg because I thought it might tear off. I felt the vehicle crank up and start to drive away. Where were we going? What would they do to me? What kind of enemy had captured me? One thing I did know, I was in a world of hurt, and these guys were in control. My life was in their hands. God help me. As soon as my captors threw me into the rear compartment of their Russian Jeep, all of my body functions erupted all at once. You name it, I did it. And the stench was strong and foul and sickening. It was as if the whole world stunk and I couldn't get away from it. My face was in it. The whole world stunk. The shorts I had on were caked with it. I tasted it. All I could do was yell, and I mean loudly, "Hospital! Hospital! Hospital!" And my captors responded, "Okay, okay." The thought came to me that maybe, just maybe, I was not the first American this bunch had ever captured. But what the hell could I do about it? Soon the Jeep began to slow. I couldn't tell if it was because darkness was about to envelop us and it was more difficult to see where we were going, or if we were actually getting closer to our destination and a slow speed was warranted. At any rate, we finally came to a complete stop, and my captors began to jabber in goop, as if discussing how to unload me without touching the stinking passenger. And it made me more than a little uncomfortable. My moans and groans were not loud enough to deaden the sound coming from a very high waterfall hitting big rocks and boulders not far from where my aching body lay. Eventually, they slid me out of the Jeep, wrapped more vines around me, and hoisted me onto their shoulders and began to descend towards the powerful sound I had been hearing. Immediately, I envisioned this as being my last seconds alive, and my entire life began flicking in front of me like an old hand-turned movie film. It was truly amazing that this could be happening. I had heard of this phenomenon, but had never experienced. The selection of visions that appeared to me was also amazing. My earliest years, something from yesterday, or earlier today, people I had not thought about in years. On and on they came. And what about how I was about to die? As if on cue, my burial train took a right turn. I got a second breath. All visions ceased, and they carried me into a small building. The sound of water falling on rocks did not end, but now there might be a different ending to this part of the story. Yes, I was still hurting more than ever, and my captors gave me another shot of morphine. I wasn't the least bit concerned about becoming an addict at this point. All I wanted was to rid myself of the physical hurting and mental devastation I was experiencing. Now the enemy wanted to get down to business. They wanted me to operate my emergency radio to lead rescuers to our site so that they could be destroyed. Fortunately, I didn't remain conscious long enough for the goons to complete their plan. I guess they thought, well, tomorrow is another day. It came too soon for me as I sank into unconsciousness again with more vivid visions, but this time they were of my beloved family. Wow, me. I think back about that a lot. But I don't dream about it. It doesn't keep me awake. I want to go now to something called my final thoughts, and then we will get down to why we're here today. This is the last chapter. I was amazed at how easy it was for me to write. Once I started writing, man, it really came fast. And I'm even thinking about doing another.
Well-
She's shaking her head. She's shaking her head. Let's see here, honey. 423 right here. This book has a lot of photographs in it. You're going to enjoy that. They're all of my family, my friends, and so forth. Chapter 81, my final thoughts. I hope that you have enjoyed being exposed to my life and the events that have christened me on my voyage around God's green earth. I can say with great certainty that my tour guide has made it interesting, challenging, and exciting in every way possible. I think that as a human being, my Maker has thrown me into just about every pothole He has created in my road of life. For that, I am very thankful, because it has drawn me so much closer to knowing what is His will for my life. I firmly believe that a smooth sailing life does not make one a better Christian, nor does it prepare one for the big tests that life uses to evaluate one's personal performance on this planet. Even with all the stress and strain that has come my way, God has provided me the strength and the will to overcome all the adversity that I have had to endure. And how can I forget my many friends who have made my life worth living? My loving wife, Catherine, and her wonderful daughters, and all 12 of our grandchildren. My sister Carolyn, who had to endure the task of caring for our parents, not an enjoyable task to say the least, and my handsome sons who grew up in spite of my being absent during their formative years. Of all the places I have lived, Concord has had the most positive impact on me. In my youth, the Baptist Church of Concord showed me the way. Then Ridgecrest, the Southern Baptist Training Center in the mountains of North Carolina, made life a lot clearer to me. But the one person who has made me into what I am today is my beautiful wife, Catherine. She is the essence of love and has taught me the true meaning of the word. I will love her forever and seek her counsel at every turn. And when you've lived for 90 years and begin to think about whom you want to mention in your book of life, you discover there's not enough paper and printing ink to do that. Yes, there are many, many people who have loved me. I love them and will never forget them. Events of my early youth, Citadel memories, Air Force experiences, POW trials and tribulations, and adjusting to life after prison. These have all become a part of me and are at this very moment shaping the rest of my life. I can hardly wait to see what happens next. Perhaps there will be more, a lot more. You can never tell what will come out of the blue. We can't make it past that. Well, that's it. And for those of you who would like books, you write checks to MPPC, that's $35. And everything that we collect goes to the capital fund here at the church as part of my participation. And then if you will, down on your check where it says FAR, put the JQC book. And that will give us all the information we need for it to go to the right place. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, we have a few minutes that you could ask me any questions that might pop in your head.
Well, I have two. Do you travel and present your book and thoughts elsewhere? or
Just
South
got
Korea?
back from Greenville, South Carolina,
Oh, great.
and had 41 people who bought 50-something books.
Good.
So that was pretty good. And we're going to be doing others. We've done book reports at Litchfield by the Sea, the bookstore down there. We've done the Cypress several times. And we've done Junior League. We had a great one there. There's been one or two others. But I enjoy doing it. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. I am not an example for everybody to follow. But I have had some experiences that nobody else has had. And I've written about them. And I've been honest, as honest as I can be. As I said, this is not fiction. This is real life stuff. And I hope that that God will have you use it in whatever way is best for you. Okay?
You have time for a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's about your, I guess, not my way of saying your time in the hotel, so to speak.
And you're talking about the Hilton.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I teach history over at Ashford High School in Gastonia, and something that was kind of introduced me from somebody that my wife works with, who's in special forces, it's the Starkdale Paradox.
Right.
It's all about recognizing the situation that you're in. And it seemed to me from what you just said was you realized very early that you weren't in control, that they were in control, your captors were in control.
Yep.
And you think that you're recognizing that that was the predicament you were in, you had no control. Do you think that helped you make it through when others did not face?
I learned that the first week at the Citadel. I didn't have to learn that again. I wasn't in control, and the upper class in the Citadel was. And you always want to fight it a little bit, you know, that gets you going. And I had mentioned this, but my cellmate for at least a year and a half was John McCain. And John and I were sort of the entertainers. John knew a million movies and he could tell them in Technicolor. I formed a choir, wrote music, all that sort of thing. And we just teamed up, and Catherine and I helped him in his campaign. John, I think, was a wee bit misunderstood at times, although he was not one to let a chance go to step out front. And he did that on many occasions in prison, and it got him in trouble a lot, like it did me. But you determine what your max is, and then you go from there. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
My brother was in and out of dynamic. He was a navigator,
Right.
so he was safe when he was on the ground, but he didn't know when he was on the ground. Isn't it true that no one knew that you were living until they saw you in a plane?
Yes, it was about 3.5 years I was missing in action, which suited my wife at that time fine, because she didn't want to pick up where we left off. Thank God for that. And then I met, you know how I met Catherine? I'm going to bring a name that the lady who was always out in the halls warming around. Not Liv. Eleanor Bell. Eleanor Bell saw me walking in the hall here one Sunday, and she said, "Are you lost?" I said, "Sort of." She said, "Would you like a Sunday school class to go to?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love that." I've been choir shopping, and I picked the choir here to sing. I always sang in a choir somewhere. I'm a music guy. So she took me up to Richard Van Root and Fred Lawrence's deal. And those guys got hold of me, and we had some fun from then on. I met someone in the Sunday school class who was attractive, and it was Virginia Davis. And then I found out she was married, and then I met her husband and kids and all. I said, well, can't win them all. So Virginia kept following up with me. She says, "I've got somebody I want you to meet." They worked together at the Serendipity. Remember that lady shop that was down in the
Around the corner.
down where Jinko's was, and that area, yeah, the villa. So one day, it was right at Christmas, I was over there, and I looked up, and here was Virginia giving me this. So I went up, and she said, "She's here." I said, "She who?" And she reminded me of Catherine. I said, "Well, great. We'll bring her out. Let's take a look at it. It wasn't quite like that. You get the idea. So I looked over, the thing was on a different level. And I was up here with Virginia and I was looking over at her. And Catherine swears that she had on the worst outfit she's ever bought, a brown something or another. She didn't like it. She didn't want to be seen in it, but there she was. And from where I stood up above looking down, everything looked pretty good. Anyhow, we met and I said, you know, I'm going to Atlanta tomorrow. And I need some gifts for my mom and my sister. So she took me around, showed me some kerchiefs and this, that, and the other. So I bought everything I needed right there. And then I said, what are you doing when you're finished here? Fighter pilot never lets. Anyhow, she says, well, I could have a drink with you at Jinko's or somewhere. I said, great, let's do that. So I found something else to do for a little while and came back and got her. And we went to Jinko's. And I had just moved to Charlotte and had gotten in a condo across the street from her parents. And her parents used to own that big home that Myers Park Methodist turned into their big meeting hall and all that. You remember? I think it was Joe Cannon's old home or somebody like that. Anyhow, it was a pretty place, and I lived across the street, and I would run every day, and I would run, and I met 3 guys that later had an impact on me, and then I noticed that they had a Democrat sign, and I'm a Republican. Across the street, the people who were there, and they had some sort of an attic sale one time because her dad and mother were in the antique business and home design and all that sort of thing. So I looked at that and I knew that that was a Democrat. I thought, well, but I told her about this. She said, yes, that's my mom and dad. And that guy is my cousin, right?
Cousin's husband.
Cousin's husband. John Ingram. John ended up running for everything that was available. And we became good friends. And after we got married, I was the only Republican at the Brown get-togethers, you know. And so they made it tough for me, as well they should. But we had a great time. And that's how I met Catherine. We actually met on 1970.
December the 20th, 1979.
December the 20th, 1979. And we dated for a year before I gave in. Well, I can see some of you people haven't matured very much. But we have had a great life. We've been married 41 years. 41 years. And God knew what he was doing. I sure did. But it was great. Some of you have become good friends of ours, and we love you. And we miss being with you. But when you get in a retirement community, you get in a different neighborhood with a different group of people, although it's great. I mean, I couldn't ask for any better than the Cypress. That is a good place. I would be a good marketing guy for them. Now, one more question. Anything?
Would you mind telling about your music and how you wrote the music and then you came out and I think you sang for the president?
And your communication system.
Yeah.
All right. Well, communications is very, very important in any situation, a relationship, whatever. And if you don't communicate, you're missing something. So we learned a tap code. And what we did was A, B, C, D, E across the top line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the line. And you take the first letter, and then the first letter tells you which line you're on. The second group tells you which line you're on, and then the next group tells you which letter in that line. And every Sunday across the wall would come. That was how we'd start communicating. And when that guy's ready, he comes back with. Now, if the enemy is over in that cell and listening, he generally just comes back with a bunch of knocks because he doesn't know what to do. So you don't communicate with him because he's gonna put you in solitary if he gets you. Anyhow, across the wall would come first row, third letter, A, B, C. C, we abbreviated everything, church call. So each of us in our own way, every Sunday would have a church call. There were, I remember the first time, it was Christmas Eve, 1965. And we were moved from a place where we were at a place we called the zoo. We were at the zoo, which was not a part of the Hanoi Hilton. But when things were ready to go, we moved into this new building we call the office, and it had tile floor. Wow. I mean, we're coming up in life. And next door, somebody was moving in there. Now you couldn't see them because there's a wall between us. There weren't iron bars so you could look and see. You couldn't do that because it was just a wall. And so I started to try to find out who's over there. The only way we knew how to do it was one tap was A, 2 was B, and the guy that just moved over there, his name was Porter Halliburton. I mean, damn, how many hours did I spend just getting that name out of there? And then you got to remember it. We did have a lot of mental exercise over there. And he was with my buddy that I had known in Europe, Fred Cherry. He was one of the a few black men we had in camp with us. And I remember sometime later looking out of a window where the slats were going down so I could see. And I was looking there, and this guy comes down. I said, I told the other guy and myself, they're passing out socks, black socks. That was Fred Cherry and his black feet. And Fred came back to a horrible situation. His wife was shacking up with somebody else. And so that went down tubes, and Fred died. He didn't have a very good life when we came back. Well, I didn't either. My wife did not wait for me. She had a Dear John letter ready for them to give to me when I got off the airplane. And that was not appreciated. Not appreciated. Anything else about that, Howard, that I missed? But communications was very important. And you can see if you do it with taps, you can also sweep with a tap code. And we had a guy named Doug Hedgel, who was a naval guy, who got washed overboard in a storm out in the bay there, out from Hanoi, and he got picked up by the natives and turned in, and they thought that he was the dumbest guy that they had ever seen, and they put him in a cell, gave him a broom, and let him wander around the camp sweeping. And he told us what was going on in all the other parts of the camp. And finally, you could not go home unless you had been okayed by the senior officer. And the senior officer never approved an early release for anybody except this Navy guy. And when he was released, we had given him hundreds of names, serial. He memorized all this in a song, sort of like old MacDonald had a farm, and he had all these, but you could not interrupt him. He'd have to go start at the beginning to do this, but he was a great help for us in our deal. Now, let's sell a few books here.
All right, thank you.
Remember, it's $35.
Have a check.
And if you want to give me an IOU because I don't have change, we'll take that and I'll collect from you later.
I like to give I give all my money to the business. So I'm happy to give you an IOU.
Yeah, let me get over here.
I just want to have it personalized.
Let me get over
I'll have to see what's, because I can't see. Hi, Peter.
Okay, Quincy, how are you, boy?
See how you got through it.
No.
That's so true. Oh, it's in yes. Thank you so much. So this is
Use it as a donation.
Right this minute.
Hey.
You doing okay? I was in the back. I was on mine for a little bit and then I snuck it through. Yeah.
You're doing youth church?
No, we had a youth meeting, just to touch base with staff, and then I had to go to work.
That means something.
Allison was just to touch base about today, and everyone else. Good to see you.
When I got to the car, the one that signs is like, I will send you a check. Yes, I wrote it.
Yes, I am.
Fine.
All right, David. David Street.
Why are you gonna use it?
My parents were out there.
Catherine, how are you?
Thank you.
Well, I wondered if you were.
Glad you got it.
You know what? No, I